Today's topic includes classifying the diversity of life. Evolution, which is the process of change that occurs in a species over time, has allowed for the rich diversity of life on Earth. There are at least 1.8 million different species on this planet, and scientists use the similarities and differences between organisms to classify them into different groups. The largest, most inclusive group is called the domain. There are 3 domains: bacteria, Archaea, and Eukarya. BAE or BAE if you're trying to memorize. Bacteria and Archaea consist of single-celled organisms only. Bacteria and Archaea consist of prokaryotes only. Remember that prokaryotes are cells that do not have a nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. They are simple cells compared to those in Eukarya. Bacteria and Archaea are very similar, but Archaea are composed of slightly different chemicals. And there are organisms in the Archaea domain that can survive in extreme environments like hot springs and salty lakes, which distinguish them from bacteria. Examples of bacteria include E. coli, which lives in your gut, C. trachomatis, which causes the STI chlamydia, and cyanobacteria, which are photosynthetic bacteria. Examples of Archaea include Halobacterium, which can survive in extreme salt conditions, and Methanobacterium, which can survive in extreme methane environments. So don't let that trip you up. Halobacterium and Methanobacterium, they have the word bacteria in there, but those are actually types of Archaea, named after the types of environments that they can survive in. Eukarya, on the other hand, consists of eukaryotes. Remember that eukaryotes are organisms whose cells have a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotes can be single-celled or multicellular organisms. The domain Eukarya is further divided into groups called kingdoms, known as the kingdom of Plantae, Animalia, Fungi, and there are multiple kingdoms of protists. The kingdoms are divided based on how those organisms obtain their nutrients. As you might have guessed, the kingdom Plantae consists of plants, multicellular organisms who produce their own sugars and other nutrients through the process of photosynthesis. So for Plantae, you want to think of grass, dandelions, and palm trees. Fungi consists of both single-celled and multicellular organisms. Fungi absorb nutrients from their environment. So they don't perform photosynthesis, they don't consume other organisms, they absorb nutrients from their environment. So for fungi, you want to think about mushrooms or baker's yeast or even the mold that you might find on your bread. Gross. The kingdom Animalia include multicellular animals who obtain food by eating other organisms, like this cute red panda, or yourself. You belong to the kingdom of Animalia. Now, you might not be as familiar with the kingdoms of protists. There are multiple. Protists are eukaryotes, and they are mostly single-celled, but like fungi, they can also be multicellular. Many are found in aqueous environments, meaning they're found in water. So now I'll give you a practice question. Let's say you're trying to identify the domain and kingdom of a newly discovered organism that is multicellular and was found to absorb nutrients from its environment. What would you say? I'll give you a moment. Okay, I'll tell you. The domain would be Eukarya. Ooh, this writing is rough. So I just wrote Eukarya. It's Eukarya because I said this organism is multicellular. Bacteria and Archaea are all prokaryotes, and they're all unicellular. So belongs to Eukarya, and you can even further identify that it belongs to the kingdom Fungi, because fungi are distinct in that they absorb nutrients from their environment rather than eating other organisms or performing photosynthesis. So let me give you one more. Try classifying a single-celled organism with no nucleus that was discovered in the extreme heat of a hot spring. How would you classify that organism? I'll give you a moment. Okay, I'll tell you. Well, being single-celled means it could be in any of the 3 domains, right? Single-celled organisms are found in bacteria, Archaea, and Eukarya. But if it doesn't have a nucleus, then it's likely a prokaryote. And prokaryotes are only found in bacteria and archaea. The key here is that this organism exists in extreme environments, which means it's likely from the domain Archaea. There we go. Now, kingdoms are still pretty broad categories. A palm tree and a rose are both plants, but they have a lot of differences. So organisms within each kingdom are classified further. The scientist Carl Linnaeus created a system known as the Linnean Hierarchy to classify organisms into more and more specific groups. But time out. Do kangaroos prefer cake or frosting, generally speaking? Think that was random? It's actually a mnemonic device to memorize the Linnean Hierarchy. In the Linnean Hierarchy, each classification group is called a taxon. Domains are the most inclusive classification. Domains are separated into kingdoms, which are divided into phyla, then into classes, then into orders, then into families, then into genera, and then into species. The two most exclusive groups, the genus and the species, they are used to scientifically name every species that we know on Earth. But let's back up. What even is a species? It's actually a more difficult question than you think. And to frustrate you further, I'm going to give you two definitions for it, even though there are many. So the morphological species concept is the idea that a species is made up of a group of individuals that have similar physical characteristics. So I'm just going to underline that, physical characteristics. Morphology refers to the shape and form of things. This works to distinguish many species, but not others, like the horse and the donkey. Horses and donkeys look very similar, but we don't consider them the same species. The biological species concept states that a species is made up of individuals that have the potential to mate and can produce fertile offspring or children. This definition can distinguish horses from donkeys because a horse and a donkey can mate and they will give birth to a mule, but the mule is infertile, meaning it cannot produce offspring and so it cannot continue that lineage of mules, and that's why horses and donkeys are considered separate species. Now, to name a species, we refer to the field of taxonomy, which is the science of naming and categorizing species into groups. You and your friends probably use common names for animals like lion, tiger, bear, human, or pine tree. The scientific name uses binomial nomenclature, which just means that it's a two-part name, and scientific names are always italicized. The first part of the name is the genus that the organism belongs to, and the first letter is always capitalized. The second part is the species that the organism belongs to, and this part is always lowercase. For example, a lion is classified in the genus Panthera and in the species Leo. The scientific name for lion is Panthera leo. Notice the italics and where there's capitalization. You can also abbreviate Panthera leo or as P.Leo, but remember to capitalize the first letter of that first word and to keep all of the letters of the second word lowercase. So let me give you a practice question. If I told you that humans belong to the genus Homo and the species Sapiens, how would you write the scientific name for humans? I'll give you a moment. Okay, I'll tell you. I would write in italics, in my very scratchy italics that I'm writing on this screen, capital H-O-M-O space lowercase S-A-P-I-E-N-S. Homo sapiens. Well, my fellow Homo sapiens, today you learned how to classify the diversity of life. I will leave you with one outstanding question. Do kangaroos prefer cake or frosting, generally speaking?